What is up, you awesome kisters? It's CistReactZ, guys. Today we are watching the first game theory for FNAF without Matt Pat. So it's called Game Theory FNAF Circus of Horrors. Hit the like button, subscribe to Game Theorist, and comment down below. Let's see it. How are they doing without Matt?
Fredbear's Family Diner.
So weird to hear a different voice.
Where it all began. The animatronic empire, the string of deaths, and William's descent into madness. Everything stemmed from this one location. Or at least,
truthfully,
we all thought until today. Hello Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, where it is finally time. Today, I graduate from FNAF boy to FNAF
How are we wrong
man
about
and take
Fredbear's?
on my very first FNAF theory. Although, I say that, I have actually been helping Matt write FNAF theories for the past 3 years.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh.
Thanks, Matt. Have a safe flight back. Bye. I didn't get to talk to you about Gregory as a robot. It's all right. I mean, to be fair, that was both of our sin, but you know.
I threw something out, my first FNAF theory, I threw something out
Yeah,
there.
Gregory as a robot, first FNAF theory, and look how well received it's been.
Look how good that's gone for
I heard it was a
It's
terribly
done
received
so
theory.
Well for all of us.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? But don't worry, theorists. I promise today's theory is way less crazy, hopefully. Because today, I'm going to be tackling one simple, teeny tiny detail that I think is really important to understanding this franchise.
Ouch.
Help Wanted 2 was full of collectibles, most of which you get from a prize machine after you beat a minigame. Some are set prizes that relate to the level you just completed, like a sun figure for beating the first daycare mission, or a meat pretzel for beating the Fazbear Theater.
There's a
However,
meat
after you
pretzel
beat the
collectible?
game, there are some extra prizes to collect that are given to you at random when you replay a stage. Usually this is just extra plushies, models, or food. But
That's their
sometimes
speaker inside
you
the
get
Funtime
posters,
Freddy
and
one.
one of these posters stood out above all the rest. It ends up on the back wall right next to the Faz Wrench entrance for the Princess Quest minigame. It's a poster promoting FallFest 1970. Now, to the FNAF community, FallFest
I haven't
is
seen that.
nothing new. We first saw this name pop up almost 5 years ago in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for the original Help Wanted. A Halloween-inspired
I missed
event
that
full of
update.
attractions, rides, and of course, spooky versions of all our favorite characters to fit in with the Halloween theme. But
Hell
there is
no, look at
one
how
crucial
Foxy
difference
looks.
between this FallFest and the one we see on the poster from Help Wanted 2, the date. The banners around the Curse of Dreadbear hub world show that this event was taking place in 1983, but this new poster is from over a decade before. This whole FallFest thing has clearly been running for a very long time. In fact, it's been running since before the earliest confirmed parts of the FNAF timeline. In the Silver Eyes, when Charlie is looking for news articles on Fredbear's Family Diner, she starts the search at 1979, seeming to imply that this was when the diner was founded. But that is 9 whole years after this poster was published. And that's not all. Look at the design of this poster. While it's advertising FallFest, it's
it looks
not
so
inherently spooky like
old.
the event we see for the Curse of Dreadbear. Instead, it has autumnal elements, but it's mostly designed to look like an old two-tone circus poster, complete with
Super
a giant
old.
circus tent right in the middle. And this isn't the first time Steel Will has offered us hints that circuses might be important to this franchise. There's the mini-games in Help Wanted 2, like the Carousel and Fazbear.
Yeah.
There's the circus costumes that are down in the basement of Ruin. There's even circus-themed
I forgot
Funko
about
merch.
those.
Clearly, Steel Will is beating us over the head
what?
with this circus thing for a reason. But why?
Circus merch? Circus Foxy, Circus Freddy? What the hell? I ain't ever seen that in my life. That's weird too, though. Like, you would think like it would be like, I don't know, like Fredbear or something like that. Circus Bonnie and Freddy. Clown makeup.
Funko merch. Clearly, Steel Will is beating us
That
over
probably
the
looks
head with this
scarier in
circus thing
person.
for a reason. But
Or in
why?
game,
well,
I mean.
back in 2022, in the build-up to Security Breach's Xbox port, Steel Will did an interview with Game Jolt to talk about how they made Security Breach, give some updates on Ruin's development, and drop some little hints towards what might be coming down the pipeline for them and the FNAF franchise. And when asked what kind of game they'd like to make in the future, they said this.
One thing that I've always would love to do is get back to kind of like the origin of like Fazbear Entertainment and see how things were made.
Same here. I'd like to head
And yeah.
further back into the 70s.
They want to create a game about the origins of Freddy's set in the 70s. Most of us at the time assumed this would just be Fredbear's Family Diner, but with all this circus imagery popping up, it begs the question, what if Fredbear's Family Diner wasn't the origin of Freddy's? What if instead it was this circus, FallFest 1970? And once I realized that, things started to fall into place. This poster is the key to
I just hope
clarifying
Fredbear is
some
involved
massive holes in
somehow.
the
He's
FNAF
my
timeline.
favorite. I
It
like
confirms
him.
a number of things we've been predicting for a while, and it shines a little more light on the franchise's latest villain. Come to think of it, maybe this
The
isn't such a small
Mimic!
theory after all. Whoops. So, you better grab your popcorn, theorists, because the show is about to begin.
What was in that
and I'm going to
popcorn?
reveal to you
There was
the
no
true
butter in that
origins
popcorn,
of
bro.
Freddy's. But just before we get into that, I need to talk to you about something else that's really important. It's something you may have seen if
The
you watch our
sponsor?
own sister location style theory. But we have an exciting theorist event coming up. We are putting on a fashion show.
Oh,
Show has
I thought it was gonna be a
FNAF
sponsorship.
movie, a FNAF cookbook, and now FNAF is completing the theorist gauntlet and
Oh.
getting a FNAF runway. Although, be surprised, he was special. We've got the like strut.
Well, I mean,
Dogs
go,
walking the
go
runway
check
and
everything
lying
out
to you
in
a
their description.
special of PST. Believe me, you do. That's April 25th.
I thought it would be a
Let's get
sponsorship.
Gimme check the runway and head back to the circus. Now, I understand there may be some hesitancy in me changing up the entire beginning of the timeline. I get it. It's a pretty big claim. And while there have been a number of hints towards circuses throughout the games and books, it doesn't
But I mean, like,
necessarily
is it that bad of a
Right.
thing
And
to
while
do
there
when you
have
can
been-
clearly see it says 1970? We're gonna have to fit it somewhere, especially if they make a game about it and put the teasers forward everywhere.
been a number of hints towards circuses throughout the games and books. It doesn't
Ew, that's what
necessarily
Circus
mean
Baby
that's where
looks
the whole
like?
thing
Or
started.
Circus Baby's
so,
pizza
let's take a look
looks
at
like?
one of the more recent examples of the circus being hinted at, so I can show you where I'm coming from. In the basement of the Ruined DLC where you find the Mimic, there are two costumes hanging up, an old lady blackbird and an elephant dressed as a clown. In the game files, there's also a lion wearing a varsity jacket. Three animals all associated with the circus. Elephants often perform tricks, lions were regularly tamed by lion tamers, and while crows or blackbirds aren't traditionally circus animals, they do often appear in circus-focused media like Disney's Dumbo. Plus, the elephant is literally dressed as a clown. It doesn't get more circusy than that. But the
Well.
most important part isn't actually their circus theming. It's the fact they aren't animatronic suits. In our initial
I low-key just hope with what I'm seeing right here, though, I just hope it doesn't lose the Freddy's aesthetic. Like, I hope there's a damn bunny somewhere. I hope there's a fox somewhere, you know? Like,
theory on Ruin.
I mean, clearly there is, because, you know, you see the Circus Foxy and Freddy, but I don't know. It's kind of weird. I also kind of hope Fredbear is somewhere, too. I don't know. Maybe I just got to see the game for it to happen, and then my brain will calm down.
We talked about how
It's
these
new,
costumes
so I'm not
seem
really
be
used to it, I
related
guess.
Circus Babies, because, you know, circus. However, when Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, or even Circus Babies Pizza World was due to launch, they were all animatronics, and complex ones at that. Why
Terrifying
then would
ones.
they have physical costumes? They wouldn't, unless these costumes actually came from something circus-themed that was before animatronics were part of this franchise. In The Mimic, not the robot, the Tales from the Pizzaplex story named after him, we learn of a character named Edwin who owns a robotics company, getting big off of making a robot vacuum
yeah.
cleaner. However, with the birth of his son, the death of his wife, and then the crippling pressure of running his own business, he decides to sell the company to none other than Fazbear Entertainment. Why does Fazbear agree to purchase? Because they want Edwin for his robotics knowledge. Specifically, they want him to turn their character costumes into full-blown animatronics. We've seen him do exactly this.
That
with
Spring
Chico
Bonnie
in the
design
first
still
few
goes
pieces
hard,
of
the drawn
story.
one on the
Later on, he
screen.
goes on to explain that
So
this
creepy.
is the 18th character he'd been asked to create, describing the collection as, quote, a circus-like array of animal and other character costumes. Circus-like, you say? We believed for a long time that Edwin is the book's parallel for Henry, the animatronic genius that helped Afton to grow Fazbear into the animatronic empire we know today. So the circus-themed costumes we see in the basement of Ruin likely came from that same time period, a period where Henry was transforming costumes into animatronics. And these costumes aren't Henry's only connection to the circus either. When Charlie goes back to her childhood home in the Silver Eyes, she looks through Henry's office and finds an assortment of books that, quote, would have seemed eclectic to anyone who didn't know the man. There were books on biology and anatomy, some on human beings, others on animals. There were books about the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. There were books about child development, about myths and legends, and about sewing patterns and techniques. There were volumes that claimed to be about trickster gods, about quilting bees, and about football cheering squads and their mascots. Most of these make a lot of sense. Things like anatomy, mascots, sewing patterns, it all ties into the idea that he was creating characters and turning costumes into animatronics. The books about child
like
development
the
either
visuals,
tie into the fact
the
that he was
keywords
teaching
highlighted and
kids
stuff.
so was trying to figure out how he could best serve his customers, or it's linked to the human anatomy books and ties into Henry creating robot versions of his daughter Charlie. But there's one selection that has always stood out as odd, one that I've never had an explanation for, and that is the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. Why would Henry need books on that topic if all the work he's ever done is on animatronics and diners? He needs it because the origins of Fazbear are rooted in traveling circuses and carnivals. It was a hint as to the first years of this business. So, this circus, FallFest, seems to
Wait a
be
second.
where Fazbear Entertainment all began.
I just thought about that, though. Like, and maybe that's why you said it at the beginning of the video. How are we gonna have an animatronic game about the circus though, if technically the only problems with the animatronics were that they were possessed or just made for the sake of like harvesting kids as like remnant and stuff? And Afton wouldn't do that without a purpose, and the purpose would be killing the kids first. So like, or the purpose would have been because he killed the kids first later in the timeline though. How would a game like this work? Now that I think about Steel Wool saying that. Because it can't be like a man versus machine. That's more of like security breach type stuff later on. It's like the man versus man was like the FNAF thing at first.
But now the question is, who else was there? And I don't mean human characters. Let's be honest, we don't have many of them that are actually.
I mean, they could
awesome,
glitch out
especially not back in
and fuck up bad.
I mean,
but
which of the Fazbear characters were part of the original roster? As I've mentioned, during Help Wanted 2, we get a number of minigames that take place in carnival-like settings, namely Fazza Blast and the Carousel. And it's the Carousel that I want us to take a look at first. The game itself is pretty straightforward. You know, when you don't have an Ash trying to desperately keep your microphone attached. Oh my god! But despite this, Matt did manage to notice.
why do they have that?
Detail in the
Just leave a
design.
microphone on in the room.
Pumpkin, just sitting there waiting to be thrown. I think we can all agree that pumpkins are something we specifically associate with Halloween. And the only event we know to take place at Halloween in this franchise is, you guessed it, Fallfest. We even get a Halloween-themed version of Moon appear during the nightmare level of the Carousel ride. The Carousel is from Fallfest, which means it's from the early part of the franchise. But then, take a look at the characters that are used on the Carousel. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, which, you know, is what you
Why does Chica look like that?
you'd expect. Except it's not just the original versions from FNAF 1. The one that immediately stands out to me is this white and pink version of Foxy. Funtime Foxy? Well,
definitely Mangle,
kinda. Because
right?
you might also notice it has a hooked hand. Something that Funtime Foxy is clearly lacking in Sister Location. However, there is a version of Funtime Foxy with a hook hand. And that's in FNAF World, a game that came out before Sister Location and doesn't have any other Funtime animatronics present, implying that Funtime Foxy...
It wasn't called Mangle back then in FNAF World? Damn, my memories are starting to fade from this game a little bit.
didn't originally belong with that group of animatronics.
Maybe I'm just gaslighting
Instead,
myself too
belonged
much.
to an earlier set, and this carousel tells us exactly which group that is. The other characters on this ride, besides Funtime Foxy and the original 4, all have rosy red cheeks, which aligns with the toy animatronics from FNAF 2. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Funtime Foxy, the toy version of Foxy. The toy animatronics being here feels wrong, doesn't it? The toys don't become a thing until
Why are me and him hitting the same pose?
Recognition software and new, more complex endoskeletons. They replaced the old withered versions of the original Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from the original Freddys. How then are they on a ride from 1970? Well, this is because I don't think the toy animatronics are meant to call back to the 1983 Freddy's animatronics. They're supposed to be referencing the original circus costumes. Going back to the mimic story, once Edwin abandons the warehouse, Fazbear employees are sent in to collect any Fazbear property. Things like their costumes. One character mentions a few of them: a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume. The original 4 were all in existence as costumes before their introduction as animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And what's even crazier is the designs of those costumes actually exist. A few years ago there was a, let's just say controversial, but at the time official FNAF artist that dropped an image onto the FNAF subreddit with zero context or explanation. The only thing we knew is that these images contained Scott's official copyright. These images were commissioned by Scott, which makes them as good a piece of evidence as any. And what are these images of? Versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica in a similar style to the mascot
What the
costumes
fuck?
you find at a theme park like Disneyland.
I haven't seen this before in my life. Or maybe I did just see, maybe I did see these but thought it was just fake. I didn't see the copyright trademark. Yeah, that would be something that they would probably use. Ugh.
All with large proportions and
Now I'm
big
not so
round
scared of the
heads in order
carnival
to have a
game.
human fit inside them. These appear to be the original costumes for the characters. And where were these costumes used? I suspect they were worn at the circus. Why? Well, notice the bright red cheeks. Exaggerated features like big red noses or cheeks have been used by
Looks
clowns
like me.
and circus performers for centuries. Joseph Grimaldi is recognized as being the ancestor for modern clowns. And in 1802, he created the design for his most iconic character, Joey the Clown. And one of the character's iconic features was painted red cheeks. Similarly,
Imagine
Albert
being known known for
Lee
that?
is known to have helped redefine a type of clown in the mid-1900s known as the August clown, complete with the bright red nose we know today. Why did both these performers...
I'm so sorry for reacting to this picture with the big bright nose. You can see my mouse cursor. I'm sorry for reacting to it like that. I just, like, my eyes did not settle on the picture. At first, I'm like, oh, shit. No disrespect to Albert the Clown or whatever his name was.
feel it necessary to have bright
Sorry.
red features for the evolution
You just
of the
did not
clown,
notice the
because when
eyes.
the
It was like,
word
oh.
clown was first recorded in 1560, it meant rustic.
I can see why
or
clowns are a little
peasant.
scary.
This often boiled down to one simple stereotype: the town drunk, who you would often see after you'd had a bit too much to drink, with a bright red nose and red cheeks. This happens when your body isn't able to digest alcohol properly, causing a release of histamines that essentially cause your face to have an allergic reaction, namely red cheeks and nose.
So in
The idea of
short,
referencing
don't
this will
drink,
make clowns or
ever.
characters immediately look foolish, silly, or disarming, so people would be quicker to laugh at them rather than be scared of them, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. That is why I believe these costumes are serving.
You don't have to worry about your
not
body
because they're
processing
trying
it
to
or
make
not if you
characters
just
look
don't
like
drink.
Drunks, that wouldn't be very child friendly. It was to invoke those same reactions of silly, goofy fun. And the
Why does it look
kicker
like
is
someone
you
could just,
see
like,
this
open
trait
it, though,
carried
like
over
their
into the most
stomachs
definitively circus
fit
costume
inside.
we've got
It's weird.
available. Elephant costume down in the ruined basement. Usually you don't get a chance to see them up close, but freeze the frame just right, or, you know, search the game files, and you'll find that although a little faded, it too has rosy red cheeks. So red-cheeked characters like the
That said gameplay from Fusion Z Gamer on the bottom. Fusion seen that? Shit. Hey, now I can like now I understand like why I never seen that footage. It's only Fusion that will like finish a game in a day when it drops and then also go into the game files. That dude is fast as hell. I love Fusion though.
the ones we see in these designs would have been right at home at a circus, which also opens up the door to other red-cheeked characters from this franchise to potentially be part of the original roster. Maybe characters that weren't originally animal costumes, but more likely humans wearing the same kind of face paint. Case in point, Balloon Boy. Balloon Boy has never really fit in anywhere. We turned on FNAF 2 and he was just there. And
Yeah.
we hated him ever since.
I said read this.
But in Security
Poor
Breach,
Corey.
he got his own arcade cabinet, Balloon World. And if you played that game, you'd see a circus tent in the background. Balloon Boy's only standalone adventure places him at the circus. But while he never fit in with FNAF 2's characters, he did have a striking resemblance to a handful of characters in Sister Location and Circus Babies. Other wooden puppets like the Magician and Fortune Teller, all jobs that would be found at a circus. Selling balloons was an important part of any circus, so Balloon Boy with his little sign offering them to children would be right at home with the rest of them. And to top it all off, when Funko decided to release their new circus line of FNAF products, it contained not just clown versions of all the characters, but versions of all of them wearing Balloon Boy's iconic outfit. We were being shown that Balloon characters, and specifically that outfit, are inherently tied to the circus. Balloon Boy has to be a part of this.
But still-
Fallfest is where he finally makes
I'm
sense.
still trying to find out how this would work. Okay, maybe like we'll be looking at the origins of Fazbear, and then maybe just because we're used to a horror game element in Five Nights at Freddy's, maybe the animatronics will just come out and try to scare you at night, just as like a filler type of thing, but it has like nothing to do with the story. Once you finish a night, you see like the origins of Fazbear. Maybe you might see Henry and William Afton at the end of the game making the new animatronics and stuff, and then the story goes forward after that. But I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the hell would anything pop off in 1970 that would... Or I don't know, or maybe it could be like... It could be like one of those Help Wanted games where you're like getting up close to the animatronics and like you're fixing them, and sometimes they might do like scary shit, but like they're still not possessed. See, that... I don't know. We're either going to be like some circus technician or some circus prepper. I can't really say a circus technician. I should say like a circus prepper or something like that. And then we're going to get all up close to the suits and stuff, and maybe they might do scary shit. I don't know. I don't know. But I don't even think in the 70s they would have animatronics. Just skin suits. Or not skin suits, but normal suits. I don't know. I just need to see Steel Wool Cook or Click Team, because Click Team also did tease some Five Nights at Freddy's stuff too, and it could be this game. I don't know.
Another example.
I just need to see
Circus Baby.
either
She's been
game
showing up
dev
a lot
cook.
in recent games, just like the circus imagery. So it feels like Steel Wool are purposely trying to connect the two. She's also got the red cheeks we've talked about, as well as that white face paint that we see on most traditional clowns. She'd fit right in at a circus. Plus, you know, she's literally got circus in her name. Maybe this character, whose placement in the timeline has perplexed us for so long, belongs way earlier in the franchise's history than any of us expected.
It still bothers me. Like, we need a reason for the circus animatronics to like work gameplay wise.
A jester costume. Now, I'm sure Matt is once again freaking out because jesters aren't clowns and they aren't part of a circus. And dude, I get it, but just trust me on this.
Or maybe the mimic could be back in the circus place, and maybe the mimic might try to kill you. But then the mimic's origin story would have to come out.
That quote from the Mimic story about the rack of costumes, after listing off the main 4 characters we know and love, they finish off by adding, and bright pink, yellow, green court jester costumes, similar to the colors we see Sun wearing in Security Breach. Yeah, I know, they're a little off, but they're pretty close. And just look at the rest of his costume. Curly pointed toes with bells, puffy trousers, or pants I suppose, and the tutu-like frills on his waist and ankles. He is 100% meant to be a court jester. He even jumps out of a freaking castle when we first meet him in Security Breach, and as Matt was very keen to point
Bro
out,
was so
jesters
happy.
originated as performers for royalty in their castles during the Middle Ages. Finally, there's the epilogues, where the jester character once again returns, but this time we get a description of its mask. Quote, Lucia stepped up to the costume, suppressing a shiver at the jester's leering, toothy grin and its wide eyes. One of Sun's most distinct features is his obnoxious, toothy grin. It's so iconic that he had to have teeth underneath his teeth just in case, and those large vacant eyes
Ew.
definitely give off that leering vibe that Lucia was describing. So, even though Sun doesn't have the red cheeks like we talked about, he still appears to be very obviously connected to the original crew, Freddy, Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie, as well as the circus. He is the last one mentioned when they're all being listed off, as if the costumes were grouped together, like they came from the same collection of characters. Characters that came from Fazbear's circus days. Sun and Moon actually make a lot of sense as characters in a traveling circus. In the tail story Bobby Dots, we get a bit of much needed backstory on this character who just showed up in Security Breach, not matching any of the 80s-tastic designs of the Pizzaplex. It turns out they weren't always a daycare attendant, but instead a performer. They put on shows where Sun would be the hero, and when the lights went out, Moon would appear as the story's villain. That ties into the comedy and tragedy masks that we found in Ruin, masks that display Sun and Moon's face. So it would have also been an ideal performance to keep kids entertained at a circus venue. And later on, when the daycare was introduced, that same Bobby Dot story describes the daycare's design as a carnival-like.
But like, doesn't something have to be wrong with these robots too? That's where I'm still stuck at. Something's gotta be wrong with them. Even if they are there back then.
He's been there since the start. And when you think about it, in the early days of the franchise, when you're trying to keep costs down, buying a full mascot costume or fursuit from a trusted provider can cost upwards of $5,000.
God
while
damn.
costumes for professional jesters and clowns are typically just a few $100, keeping costs nice and low when you're first starting out. It really feels like the circus origin is helping characters that are out of place have a place to finally belong. Sun and Moon, Baby, Balloon Boy, all of them would be right at home here at the circus. However, Fallfest isn't just the origins of the Fazbear franchise. It's also the origins of William Afton's first major tragedy. Fazablast in Help Wanted 2 is a shooting gallery that matches the design of the hub world.
Oh yeah, caught on fire, right?
Dreadbear even makes an appearance at the attraction. So, this attraction clearly takes place during Fallfest 1983. However, the penultimate Fazablast level ends with you shooting a number of rockets and popping all the balloon versions of the animatronics that appear. Doing so seems to cause a chain reaction that leads to the whole thing ending up in flames. And when you go back for the final level, the place is burnt.
Why is it always fire with
the
Afton?
same thing happened during the carousel ride. As you try to fix it, sparks fly and the thing lights up, leading to the nightmare version of the level where the whole place is already ablaze. And if you go out of bounds during that carousel
Somebody
level,
could die.
you can see the red sky, burnt trees, water tower, and windmill that are all present.
Yeah, maybe somebody dies and then they possess the animatronics.
Steel Wool is clearly showing us that much like every other establishment in this franchise, this event, Fallfest 1983, ended in fire. 1983 sucked for this franchise, but especially for Afton. He loses his kid to a malfunctioning springlock suit and his other son's negligence. Fredbear's family diner gets shut down, and to top it all off, he loses the thing that started this whole business, the circus. Steel Wool is all about a sympathetic villain backstory.
Try not to set out to make a cool looking villain. Go make a monster They have a reason for it. These aren't just like these supernatural forces that came out of nowhere to just hurt people and punish people, right? Like there were results of other.
I like how Steelwool was talking too, like they're cooking, and they know they are, but they can't say anything about it yet.
A little less surprising that Afton could suddenly snap and go on a murder spree.
He sounded so excited.
This tells us more than just how this first chapter in FNAF history ended. It also tells us that there was one other character here, someone else present from the beginning that you wouldn't suspect: the Mimic. Yeah,
I was thinking it had to be the Mimic. That has to be the wrong with the circus or some shit.
Since the earliest days of the franchise. We get a lot of different descriptions for the Mimic during the epilogues of Tales from the Pizzaplex. Sometimes it's a traditional endoskeleton, other times it's a spider-like mess of slimy black wires. But when we are first introduced to it, we're given one extra detail. A detail that I never fully understood. Quote, "It wasn't just a basic metal structure. Its steel frame was contained within a built-in collection of metal rods and curved plates and an impressive system of ball joints and pistons. All of it was topped with a long, vaguely rectangular-shaped shiny steel skull. The skull was the only part that was shiny. The rest was dark and discolored, as if it had survived some kind of fire." That's a pretty specific way of phrasing it, especially when it points out that the head isn't blackened by the same issue. We're being given a clue as to where this Mimic came from, because the other detail that's important to bear in mind is that quote comes from the very start of the story, when the endoskeleton first arrives at the Pizzaplex. It was delivered to this location already burnt, which tells us that it had to be in a previous Fazbear fire, and I believe that fire was the fire of Fallfest. But what makes me so sure that the Mimic got all burned during that fire specifically? Here's the thing. I know we always joke that everything in this franchise ends in fire, but we can actually count the number of fires on one hand, even if you're an animatronic with only 4 fingers, which means it shouldn't be too difficult to go through each one and determine which one the Mimic came from. Working backwards, there's a fire at the end of Security Breach if you beat the burn trap ending. Afton is defeated, the blob steals him away, and the entire Pizzaplex catches fire and collapses. But as we've talked about before, it doesn't seem like this is the canon ending for Security Breach. We find Gregory's drawings for the non-canon endings during Ruin, and the last one we collect is his drawing of the burn trap ending, which means this fire wasn't a real fire. And even if it was, this ending takes place at the Pizzaplex, so the Mimic couldn't have been delivered to the Pizzaplex burnt from a fire, as the burn trap ending comes later in the timeline. Second option is the FNAF 6 fire, but once again we face issues with timeline. The Pizzaplex is being built on top of the FNAF 6 location, which means the...
I just feel like FNAF nowadays just needs one goddamn ending, and we just see it. There's too many things to put together, bro. God damn it.
Mimic wouldn't
But FNAF has always been like that, so what's new?
be able to be delivered to that location when the Pizzaplex is being constructed, like we see in the book, because it would have already been there. The only other fire left other than Fallfest is the FNAF 3 fire, but the owners of Fazbear Fright seemed pretty stoked when they found their first working animatronic, Springtrap. Up until this point, they'd only had bits and pieces like
We
a
found
Foxy
one,
head. So
a
it feels
real
like they'd
one.
also made a pretty big deal of finding a Mimic, bringing it back to the location, even if they thought it was just an endo. So it doesn't feel like it can be that one either, which leaves only one fire for the Mimic to have been burnt in, the fire of Fallfest 1983, meaning the Mimic has been around for a long time. We actually theorized this back when we covered Sun and Moon after the events of Ruin. We connected the Mimic's thrown together, thin, simple animatronic design to that of Sun and Moon. Namely, a very weird but distinct feature, independently moving teeth. It's a strange design detail that we've never seen before. So for both characters to have the same detail in the same game makes it seem like they have to be connected in some way. And if Sun and Moon come from the early Fallfest origins of the franchise, then the Mimic being around at the same time would explain that connection. But there's one more detail that tells me that the Mimic has to have been around during the Fallfest era of FNAF, something that's been right under our noses for years. For a while now, we've believed that the glitch trap virus in Help Wanted 1, the virus that takes the shape of a yellow bunny rabbit and takes over Vanessa's mind, isn't actually William Afton himself, but instead a version of the Mimic program that is mimicking Afton's behavior. In the game, we heard about Fazbear trying to keep costs down for this
Forgot
new
about
game
that.
they're developing.
I mean,
People have been
they
saying
sent
that.
us stuff in the
I'm gonna
first
catch up.
place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It was a budget thing, I guess. It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old.
That game was Help Wanted. It's an in-universe game that takes the original FNAF games and turns them into new VR experiences, which is exactly what we learn happened to the Mimic program in the storyteller.
Scott Shades.
Quote, it's a simple template-style software that takes previously created stories and rearranges them into new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games. That is what Glitch Trap is. The Mimic program, having been scanned into the system, gets a crash course in Afton's murdery.
Let me hear that one more time.
Mimic program having been scanned into the system, gets a crash course in Afton's murdery.
I said let me hear that, but then I read it in my head.
Hence, he
I'm an
appears
idiot.
as Afton's iconic yellow rabbit. Except there's one part of this explanation that never sat right with me. If the Glitch Trap Mimic was learning about Afton from the in-universe games of FNAF 1 to 6, then why does he take this form? Afton in all of those games, even in the 8-bit minigames, is always wearing his Springlock suit, because that was the costume he wore.
Is he gonna
at
say
Fredbear's
that that's
family
an
dining? But the version of
early?
the suit the Mimic shows us as Glitch Trap is a completely different design, and at the time, we'd never seen this version before. This isn't his Springlock suit. It's a hand-sewn suit with plastic-looking facial features similar to the ones we saw on that concept art. Those suits came from FallFest, and so it would make sense.
I hate. Bro. Let me go on the rant later. But the other thing I was about to say was, oh God, I really hope this doesn't come back. This thing looks terrifying, but like I also hate the design of it.
For this hand-sewn golden rabbit suit to have also come from the same time period. But for the Mimic to have been able to copy this design, it would have to have some memory of this version of Afton in its memory banks prior to being uploaded to the Help Wanted game system. It would have to have observed Afton perform in this iconic golden rabbit costume alongside a golden singing bear at FallFest. The Mimic would have to be around during the early costume days of the franchise. Tape Girl did say the circuit boards looked pretty old after all.
It was just junk. Circuit boards and things like that. Look pretty old.
Maybe the Mimic was originally meant to mimic Afton specifically. I'm not entirely sure of this, to be honest, but it does feel like this is where the clues might be heading. Both FallFest and the diner were open until 1983 after all, so they coexisted for at least 4 years, with the diner opening in 1979. And we know that Afton was performing as Spring Bonnie at the diner, so it's possible that the Mimic was part of Afton's plan to expand the business. He could literally be in 2 places at once. Eventually, the Mimic would be locked underground, with some circuit boards containing its programming set aside just in case. And when the Mimic software was finally used again to help speed up the process of a new VR game, it was shown all of those old FNAF games. And while it watched and learned, it recognized someone, William Afton, the golden rabbit from the circus, and so decided to take on the form it remembered from all those years ago, creating the monster we have spent the last 3 games and 2 DLCs trying to stop. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Wow, it feels weird hearing MatPat's line being said by somebody else, but hey, he killed it. He killed that episode. Okay, I'm glad the whole aura and energy of game theory didn't die because MatPat left. I'm glad there's people keeping it up, theorizing video games. But yeah, back to my thing. I was about to say after I seen the Spring Bonnie animatronic. Sorry, I just heard a noise. Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like the Spring Bonnie like era just kind of fell off, didn't it? Like in terms of design, like I don't know. After FNAF 6 came up, I've never seen Spring Trap ever look cool again. And wait, let me pull up an image of Scrap Trap, or not Scrap Trap, Burn Trap. Let me look at Burn Trap one more time before I say something. Okay, you know what? I will say that Burn Trap almost, sorry, NVIDIA blur effects, but we all know what Burn Trap looks like. I would say that Burn Trap brought back the Spring Bonnie, like, look back to normal, but then we got like Glitch Trap, and then and I guess maybe they're gonna take the Glitch Trap suit and then throw it forward in this new circus thing. You know what? If I think about it though, this Glitch Trap outfit, or I'm just gonna say Circus Bonnie, I guess. I guess that's what we have to call it. This Circus, I don't know, because I feel like Circus Bonnie would be blue. Anyway, I'm gonna call it Circus Bonnie, but I'm talking about Glitch Trap. I'm just gonna assume that we're gonna have to make Circus Spring Bonnie look ugly. so it falls in the timeline as this was the very first suit. And then I'll just have to go back to thinking about Spring Bonnie and actually how it looked back in like the FNAF 3 and FNAF 4 era. Because that's how I like Springtrap. Like he just looks better that way. And I'm just gonna try to ignore the Scrap Trap design. I'm sorry, Scott, but you did not cook with the Scrap Trap design. Like, you cooked him literally in the story, but you did not cook with the design. He looks weird. Like, I know a suit's gonna look uglier when it breaks down, but he just looks mad weird. Like, even Scrap Baby looks better than him, and she had a whole deterioration. But I'm sorry for rambling on. This video got longer than it needs to be. If you guys want more FNAF game theory, hit the like button, comment down below. I'll see y'all later. Peace out.